Okay, can I just say that I have never seen an audience sit down without being asked to. This is very, very good. Let's have a hand, yeah. Amazing, amazing. So thank you very, very much for joining us today. My name is Lord Amer. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this very, very special event. Here today, we're going to inaugurate the Rebecca L. Spencer Lectures on Stories of Faith. The lecture series was established to honor and express appreciation for Rebecca's 30 years of thought leadership, pastoral care, and inspiration, both here in our church. So I met Rebecca in the late 1980s, I think it was, as a fellow volunteer at the Genesis Center, where together we worked to help refugees in Southeast Asia resettle in Rhode Island, having escaped Pol Pot and other horrors in their homeland. Rebecca's been something unique and special to many of us. For me, she's been a source of compassion. In my deepest sadness, a voice of grace in the wake of my failures, and a source of encouragement in my pursuit of service to our community, which oftentimes have been crazy, insane things, and Rebecca still says, go for it, which I really love about her. Rebecca's challenged us to be our best selves. She's helped us see that there is not one right path, but many righteous paths, where we learn from both our struggles and our joys, where we can explore and appreciate the beauty and complexity of the people and the world around us, where though we fail ourselves and others along the way, we can rebuild and improve with faith, humility, and kindness. Rebecca has shaped Central Congregational Church to be a place of comfort and trust, where we share and care for each other. In so doing, we expand the power and possibility of each of our spirits. Rebecca, it is such an honor for me and for all of us to celebrate you in this way. Thank you for 30 years of encouraging us to enjoy the world and change the world. Please welcome our friend Rebecca Spencer.
Singer-songwriter Patty Griffin is out with a new album. I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but she was just interviewed on PBS recently. And my friend and fellow pastor who's out in Seattle, a fellow named Tony Robinson, wrote about Patty Griffin's new album. And Tony wrote, "It's more autobiographical than her previous work. It's a turn prompted by a recent bout with cancer." She's 55. In the course of the delightful interview, Griffin made a couple of observations that rang true for Tony and for me as I read his review. While her thoughts aren't exactly unique, they are authentic. She commented that her illness had been a wake-up call, drawing her fist gently toward her forehead to indicate the bluntness of that wake-up call. She summed it up as, "You will not be getting out of here alive, by the way, so you better start living the life you want to live." Tony says that is one of the gifts of aging, the realization, as a prayer that we both are familiar with, puts it, time is made more precious by its passing, something that I think rings true for all of us. But Patty Griffin's summary was more direct and urgent than that lovely but refined line. She says, "You better start living the life you want to live." I'm not sure how we sometimes miss that point. I agree with Tony that for a stretch of life, many of us live the life or try to live the life that we think we should be living. And those expectations may come from parents or spouse or community or from society's definition of success, which places like Central always stand in juxtaposition with. We can get so focused on those shoulds that we may find it difficult to really even know what the life you want to live might be. Getting a little older often means not having quite so many responsibilities and daily obligations thrust upon you, supporting yourself and a family, raising kids, tending to aging parents, and so it pushes the question forward. What is the life you want to live? And are you living it? So a church like Central Church poses this question freely. And this series, inspired by my friend Lauren Adrian and made possible by Lauren's gracious generosity, thank you, hopes to help all of us look more closely at that question. How do we want to live our lives in communities of all different kinds? Well, some of the answers to that are with love and laughter, certainly, with human connections, certainly, with an ever-expanding sense of community so that we can find what unites us rather than what sadly divides us, with attention giving to the mysteries that are beyond us, to what we call the transcendent, certainly, with strength to meet the sorrows that will come, certainly, but with hope that enables us to share our joys, certainly. So stay tuned for the next session that Lauren will be working on with me and others. And I really want to welcome our first speaker, Jessi Hempel, as we at Central Church continue to work to listen and to learn from one another and from wonderful people that we invite in, to expand our sense of community and to find ways that help us serve others, realizing once again that time is made precious by its passing. So now Lauren's going to introduce Jessi.
Thank you. So it's my hope that these conversations will encourage and embolden our spirits, bring us together to serve and to lead each other in the community, give us courage to imagine and pursue possibility and expand the good ripples that we make in the space and time of our lives. You've all read Jessi's bio, so I won't repeat it. But I will say that a couple of things, that I came to know Jessi first as a kind and creative, very creative babysitter of my children, Ariana, Sam, and Grace. And as a gentle and knowing source of comfort and peace after Grace's sudden death. Then, as an extraordinary example of love and integrity in her pursuit of self. Then, as an explorer of the world of ideas. Then, as an interpreter of global innovation and change. It is such a pleasure to welcome Jessi, her wife Frances, and their son Jude to Providence, and to introduce my dear friend Jessi.
Am I good to go? Can everybody hear me? I have never gotten a welcome like that. I feel like we should all go home right now while we like get that on mine. That was amazing. So thanks to Lauren and to Reverend Spencer for having me. You know, when they called me to speak, I wasn't sure what I could possibly say about faith. I told Lauren, you know I don't go to church, right? I was baptized Methodist, but I haven't gone to church regularly since I was a kid. I'm completely uncertain about God, and I just want to put that up front right away. I've made my professional life as a technology journalist, writing about people in Silicon Valley who, through the evolution of their companies like Facebook and Twitter and Uber, pretty much think they are God. But then in an email, Rebecca, she doesn't remember this, but she did remind me, she said, faith is inclusive and mysterious in its very essence. And then I felt like I had to come because I certainly believe that. That I know I believe. It's about bringing people in and it's about human connection. So I sat down and I thought, okay, I'm going to write down what I believe. And then I looked at the paper for 3 hours and nothing came out of my pen. And I cried to my wife that I was not going to do this. This was a silly assignment, like the wrong person had been asked. And then I wrote this down, that I believe that people are all part of one perfect and consistent energy, and therefore in our differences, absolutely the same. That we suffer most in this world when we think we live apart from each other, in isolation and on our own. And I believe that faith is learning to listen well to people, to ourselves first and foremost, and to others, and being brave enough to share our authentic selves. And this is how we connect deeply to each other and to whatever the divine is. I believe that all that is holy exists within these connections. And I guess in my professional life as a journalist and in my path on the earth for 43 years as a human, I've learned a bit about people, especially those who appear really different from me, and how to get along with them. I've sat down to dinner with the Mormon family in Provo, Utah. I spent the afternoon with the chicken seller in South Africa trying to figure out how and why she used the internet. I learned that basically she's putting 2 dots on it just like me. Not long ago, I had to prompt Mark Zuckerberg to please change his shirt before we walked on stage together because he was sweating so bad because he was so nervous. And I've puzzled over the vocabulary words to use with my own brother as he explained his desire to carry a child as a trans man. So tonight, I'd like to share just 4 stories that illustrate what I've learned about connecting to people. 3 shorter stories and 1 longer story. First, accepting people begins with accepting ourselves. I'm the oldest one in that picture, my sister and my brother. I came out to my parents in a car on a ride home from my first year at Brown University. Everybody had seatbelts. My mother cried. She told me that she thought my cousin Charlie was gay because he was very emotional. He was 11. She bemoaned the fact that my life was going to be hard. She was sad I was going to have kids. But then she told me that she loved me. My dad was driving and he stared straight ahead and he held the wheel tight, 10-2, and he said nothing. So the next morning I was in the kitchen, I was pouring myself some cereal and he sauntered into the kitchen and he said, you know, I thought I was gay once too. And I said, oh, what did you do? And he said, oh, I married your mother. So it will surprise none of you to learn that within a couple of years my father came screaming out of the closet. And very extended rainbow phase, towels, candles, years of rainbow gifts. My brother was next. By the time he finished Oberlin, he identified as transgender. And within a couple of years, my sister came home and announced she was marrying a woman. My mother is the only member of my family who identifies as straight, and sometimes I tease her that she just wants to be different. We joke in the family that there must be something in the water. You know, as adults, we're close. We text each other daily. My siblings are my first calls when anything goes wrong. But in our youth, we never really talked. My entire early family life was one in which all of us were closeted, forced to hide the part of ourselves that framed us. I learned later that my father had tried to come out as a teenager and that a social worker at his church had encouraged him to just get married, it'll be fine, people go through that. My mother had had a violent boyfriend herself right before she met my dad, and she saw this effeminate son of a minister and thought, he's going to be great. It's important to say here that none of us remember the story of our childhood in my house the same way, and that's because we barely existed in this same childhood. We lived in the same house, but in different closets, connecting very little. Coming out for me was not a singular event. It was a years-long, uncomfortable process, really for all of us, I think. It didn't magically make us all best friends either. In fact, they are my first calls, but I get along with my siblings maybe like 65% of the time. My parents' divorce stretched out over years. They still don't talk to each other unless it's absolutely necessary. My mother was once hospitalized for depression over it. But here, and I'll speak for myself, I came to terms with who I was, and as I did that, as I was able to be honest with myself, I was able to have more compassion for my siblings and my parents, and finally to connect with them. So that is lesson number 1 that I've learned. Accept people, and that begins with accepting ourselves. So lesson number 2. I think that we're here to bear witness to each other. I think that's the point. And I think that my profession has given me a unique angle on the how to do that. I became a journalist because I wanted to write, and I got to do that. But I was never the best writer. There were always people who were better than me. My gift has always been listening. I'd come back to the newsroom, and I would have learned something that nobody else would have learned, and I wouldn't even know why people had told it to me. You know, most of the time when we listen, we're listening for something with a set of biases, and I'm particularly guilty of doing this to my wife. I listen to her, but I usually think that I know what she's saying, so, you know, I usually interrupt before she's done talking to explain what she really needs. But writing long magazine pieces, and now hosting long interviews for a podcast that I host called Hello Monday, it requires a different approach to listening. I've excelled in particular at The Art of the Profile, which is a long magazine piece about a person. And when you're doing one of those, you basically drop into their life. You stay for a while, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks, and you just ask them to explain themselves. And as they're explaining themselves, you listen to the words, but you also try your best to listen to everything else. Most of the people I've written about, they've been nothing like me. Many times I can't understand where they're coming from. But my job as a journalist isn't to change their mind about their worldview, but try to understand it, to really pay attention so that I can convey it. I threw this photo of Melinda Gates up because I was in Seattle earlier this week interviewing her. And I've known her for a long time, and she's a great example of this. You know, she startled me. I actually have interviewed her a ton about her life, and she's very surprising because what most people don't necessarily know about Melinda is that she's extremely technical. She's a computer coder, that she went to school to be a computer scientist in the early 80s. That at Duke, she was one of the only women in her coding class. And then she got to Microsoft and the CEO fell in love with her, and we all forgot about that part of her life when she became the wife of Bill Gates. And she's very private, and so she never showed us the other parts. So recently I had this interview with her where she was finally letting me know about what her view of the world was. And she told me, yeah, well, you know, when my kids were born, I just decided to stay home with them because I think that a woman should stay home with her kids if they could. And like the fire went out of my ears. I was like, I grew up as a feminist and believed that I want to work and that I fought for that right, and I don't understand where you're coming from. And were she my wife, I probably would have gotten into an argument with her about it. But because she was somebody that I was writing about, my job was to listen to her all the way through. And in fact, when I listened to her all the way through, her perspective on the world was actually not that different than mine. And in fact, I felt like I could connect with her even though it was a very different perspective. So this journalistic approach to listening, it served me well. A couple years ago, my brother, who is trans, became pregnant. And we decided that we would collaborate on an article about his pregnancy for Time magazine. We decided that I would interview him about the experience every couple of weeks throughout the pregnancy. And if you've ever interviewed a family member, you realize that you actually don't know these people at all. I realized as a sister, I refrained from asking him all manner of questions that would have allowed me to know him more deeply. I just figured I knew the answers, or I figured they were too private and I didn't want to go there. Questions like, did you always want to have kids? Or how do you really feel about your body? But in this new sort of paradigm where I was a journalist and I needed to write about his experience for a broad audience, I found myself asking those questions and then not interrupting and listening to his answers. And I've never felt closer than then to my brother. So that's sort of the conclusion of my idea about what it means to bear witness to each other. So then my third story is about having a sense of humor. That's my dad, the one on the right. The one on the left is his husband, Bruce. And so I think that one of the most important things as we try to connect with other human beings is that we have to invest attentions, and we have to have a sense of humor about the whole thing. It'll carry us through when other things go on. So a while ago, I came home from work to find my wife like nervously chopping vegetables. Nervously. She's like, "Did you see Instagram? Did you see your dad's Instagram?" And my father had, in fact, posted a half dozen photos of him and his husband on the rocky coast of Oregon where they lived. In one, he was crouched like a leopard, looking back over his shoulder, wearing nothing but Tevas. He had Tevas on. This photo here, this is from the shoot, but this is not that photo. This is a PG version of that photo because, unlike my dad, I'm not comfortable showing naked photos of my parents to other people. Whether I know them or not. Here's the conundrum. My dad didn't come out until he was 50, and if he wants to get naked and take photos, I'm in full support of him being whoever he wants to be. But social media is social media. And my wife, Frances, over there, she comes from Mississippi. Her family mostly wears clothes in their pictures. In fact, actually, mostly all of them do. And I think it's safe to assume. And my dad befriended all of her family members, which, like, awkward. Just don't do that. So what I did in these moments, because yes, these moments actually happen kind of a lot in my family, is that I called my sister and my brother, and we decided to triage. We're like, okay, who's going to be the one to call Dad and ask him to either take the photos down or change his privacy settings? And my sister and my brother, they couldn't see the photos because they had actually called him after a trip to Hawaii like a year earlier. You don't need to know about those photos, but let's just say these were tame compared to those. And so I turned to Frances and I said to Frances, my wife, she's sitting over there in case I'm going to tease her about this later. I said, would you mind just like screenshotting those photos and texting them to my sister and my brother so they can see just what we're talking about? And so she does that, she screenshots them, she puts them in text. Maybe this has happened to you, maybe you know where this is going, but it's like far worse than that. She starts filling in my sister's name and my brother's name, and Apple's predictive software says, oh, you're trying to email the Hempel family, and sends them to my mother. So I hung up with my siblings and I called my mom, and it was 2 seconds later, but it was too late. I call her up and she's like, Jessi, why is Frances sending me nudie photos of your dad? You will remember, my parents do not talk to each other. And Frances still, I think, is probably feeling a little sick even hearing me relate the story because it made her feel awful. And my mother was just not very nice about it. My father was not very nice about it. But my sister and my brother and I, it's our favorite story. We laugh about it all the time. Because we're all trying to do the best we can. And when it's that absurd, you have to laugh. So I have one more story for you. Once we get past the sense of humor. This is probably my longer story. But this is about how I think that ultimately people become our redemption. So a year ago this month, Frances was newly pregnant, and we went to the doctor for an ultrasound. And she did the ultrasound, and she looks up a little like, how do I say this? And she's like, how do you feel about twins? This is how we felt about twins. This is the photo that we snapped on the sidewalk that day as we walked out, and truly we had no idea what was ahead of us. Within a month, we'd sold our one-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side, and we were prepared to start a life as members of Multiples Club. Then, when Frances was 20 weeks along, we learned that one of our sons had a problem with his umbilical cord, and he was too tiny. For the next 8.5 weeks, we waited and watched and prayed. And each week, by the way, since I said the thing earlier about God and not being sure about God, we just hit every God. Like, if anybody could put out a God, we prayed to that God. And each week, several times a week, we would walk from our house on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, through Central Park, to our doctor's office. And we would be waiting to find out if when she did the scan, she would hear 1 heartbeat or 2 heartbeats. Meanwhile, the babies grew, and we named them Astor Reed and Jude Rowley. And as the weeks passed, they began to kick. Jude had sort of a hard kick down on the left side, and Astor would flutter up here on the right. And we'd tell him, we'd say, no, stay, Astor. Every night before we go to bed, we'd say, we want you here, you gotta stay, you gotta work for this. Know that you're working. And at first the impossible happened. Astor didn't die. He reached the minimum viable weight for delivery, 1.2 pounds, which is so tiny. He passed the 24-week mark, and if he were a single child, the doctors told us they would have delivered him right then. But as his parents, we faced this really awful ethical decision. We had 2 children in the same room, and every day that we let them both stay in was a day that threatened Astor more, but that gave Jude more of a chance. The choice, the doctors told us, was ours. No one can make that choice for us. So when the boys were 28 weeks along, our doctor said it was time to consider delivery. We toured the NICU. Frances took the steroid shots to help the baby's lungs develop. We met with the lactation consultant, and we began to prepare for the extended stay at the hospital that would come with both babies. That night our doctor called us and he said, it was 11 o'clock, and he said, I know this is a hard decision. Just know that whatever decision that you make today, you're not ever going to be comfortable with it, no matter which way things go. We decided to try to hold out to get to 29 weeks, maybe 30, but definitely 29. We just thought, well, if we've made it this far, like, if we can just wait. I just remember this pile of medical journals, because we were at the point where that was the only tool that we really had to make an informed decision. And 2 days before we hit 29 weeks, we went for our scan and there was only 1 heartbeat. So we left the hospital and we walked through Central Park, all the way home. And Frances carried our sons for 7 more weeks, one growing and flipping and pushing against her ribs, and one quietly resting and waiting. And my memory of those weeks is a blur. I don't remember the events, I remember the people. Frances's mom and stepdad flew up from Mississippi to unpack boxes in the home we'd hardly found, because remember back then when we thought we had twins, we sold our apartment? Colleagues sent flowers, and then food, and then more flowers. People we didn't know well dropped meals over. People I'd written about once sent soup in the mail. Someone introduced us to a bereavement doula named Jay, who specializes in helping families who don't bring their babies home from the hospital. Jay was magic in many ways, but her greatest gift was her extreme comfort with silence and with other people's discomfort. In the end, the babies came early. Frances went into labor on the first Wednesday in October. I wish you could have seen her. She was so amazing. I called all of our families. It was a Wednesday, and you know, like if you've ever had a first baby, like a lot of times you get to the hospital way, way, way too early. So even as we were like getting in the taxi and going, I remember calling work and being like, I'm gonna be late. Because in my mind, I was like, they're gonna send us home, that's how this stuff works. And we get in there and the doctor's like, oh no, you're having these babies, they're coming today. And as I tried to compete with that meant, I called up all of our families, and they had to fly from Mississippi and from Oregon, and everybody got there before the babies came out. Don't ask me how that happened. Once she started pushing, she pushed both babies out in 20 minutes. It's impossible to put words to the discordance that goes with experiencing the happiest and the saddest moment of your life in a 5-minute period. Jude arrived feisty and hungry and alert, and Astor was tiny and perfectly formed. Both boys had the same elongated feet, with bulbous little heels. And we brought both boys up to the recovery room where our families gathered around us to help us say goodbye to Astor. 2 days later, we put tiny Jude in a car and called an Uber to go home, car seat, called an Uber to go home. Anyone who's ever had a baby also knows how insane it seems on that first day when they just give this tiny human to you and say, you'll be fine. When we met the social worker at the hospital, I had asked for the playbook on grief. I was like, okay, we're gonna do this. We've got a great relationship. We've got lots of friends. Just give me the 1-2 tackle. Like, is it support group, therapy, and then you're done? Like, and she's like, no, that's not how it works. You don't get better. The grief will get better. You will be different. What will happen is that the grief you experience will always remain exactly the same size. But over time, other experiences will crowd up around you, and your life will become fuller and fuller. Jude is 5 months old, and that feels true. I am still grieving. I still turn corners when I see twin strollers coming down. For whatever reason, that's the thing. Like when I see twin strollers at the end of a sidewalk, stomach turns. And Frances, because she has a sense of humor, will lean over and be like, they're not twins, they're probably just cousins. I have yet to arrive at what exactly to say when people ask me how many kids I have. Because to answer the question, one feels too untruthful. But to really answer the question feels absolutely alarming for strangers. But the days are filling up. Visits home to Mississippi and holidays and dinners with friends and bottles of wine. With Frances, who has this way of making everything hard feel easier, and who isn't afraid to clip our tiny son's toenails, which to me is so scary. It can function on no sleep, it turns out. And with Jude, who is the most amazing miracle. He sleeps through the night now and he can roll over. And every morning when I walk into his bedroom, he looks at me like I'm some long-lost friend come to make mischief again. You know, Jude is still less than 6 months, which means that he still doesn't understand that he is actually a separate human being than me. He thinks that my toes wiggling are the same as his toes wiggling, and we're just one big pile of human, that's all of us. And that sense of independence doesn't even begin to kick in until about 6 months. I wish this thing that he believes now could stay with him forever, because that is really what I think is true. We're all one big, spectacular mass of humanity, working our way closer to each other with every breath. That is my story. Thank you.